Welcome back, all you would-be's out there, to our 11th lesson on power tools. Actually, this is handheld power tools. We'll get to woodworking machinery in a later lesson. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through the way I bought my handheld power tools. The first power tool I bought was an electric drill. So even when you don't have any tools at all and you're trying to make something, electric drills are pretty cheap, and you usually need to drill holes and things to put them together, put them together with 2x4s. If you don't have any other power tool at all, electric drill is pretty good. This is an electric drill. Now this is the chuck. Some have a chuck that has a key, but this is a keyless chuck, so you can take the bit out by just turning the chuck like this. I have a bit in here for a screw gun. Now an electric drill can become a screw gun, and you can drive screws with it. So you want to make sure that your first electric drill is at least a 3/8 collet, which means at least a 3/8 diameter bit will fit in there. It needs to be variable speed. The further back you pull the trigger, the faster it goes. And it needs to be forward and reversing so that you can put screws in and take screws out. So here's the forward and reversing switch. Trigger, the more you pull it, the faster it spins. So at least get a 3/8 inch forward and reversing, variable speed electric drill. And then you can put one of these bit holders in here that will hold either a Phillips bit or a straight bit, and now you can drive screws with it instead of just drilling holes with it. So when you got to have the electric drill, plus you got to have the drill bits. So you have to buy the drill bits, a set of drill bits. Usually you start off with a set that ranges from 1/16 of an inch to a 1/2 inch in increments of a 1/16. So that's the electric drill. Now, this is only a 3/8 electric drill, so if you're working around your shop and on big commissions on furniture and you have to drill very large holes, like a 4-inch hole with a hole saw, you need a little bit more powerful drill than your common drill, and you get up to a 1/2 inch. This is a 1/2 inch collet here and a chuck here, and it has a chuck key with it. So this is the key. The key is permanently attached, so you don't lose the key. You lose the key, you're in trouble. So the key goes in here, and this will open up to a 1/2 inch, but it's much more powerful. So if you had a big hole saw out here, and you were drilling with it, and it got caught, this is so strong that it could damage your wrist. It can break your wrist. So you usually have, when you get to a 1/2 inch, you usually have an extra hand here so you can hold on to this tight, and when you're drilling down, you can make sure that it doesn't catch and get away from you. Of course, you let go of it. You can let go of it. It doesn't really break your wrist before you let go, but you want to have two hands on a bit, on a drill bit that's this strong. Now that gives you the ability to drill a hole. Now there are one more. This is battery powered. Keyless chuck, battery powered. The Japanese, Koreans, and Taiwan, they make these pretty cheap. You can get this less for 50 bucks. It comes with 2 batteries, and they work pretty good, but you don't need any cordless tools. Get corded drill first because it's more powerful, and you can always count on it. These batteries go dead on you. That's the electric drill. First power tool you're going to need. The next power tool is some way to cut the wood, some way to saw the wood. And most people, most craftsmen, will usually buy one of these, which we call a saber saw. So the board is here, this blade goes up and down, and it will cut right across the board. And it usually goes twice this depth, so you can usually cut about 1.5 inch thick board with this right here. You can put a longer bit in it, a longer blade in it, and it can cut deeper and deeper. But these are very good. Of course, this is variable speed too. The faster you pull the trigger, the further you pull the trigger, the faster it goes. So you want to make sure, and the variable speed is very important in a drill for driving screws. And secondly, the harder the material you're cutting is, the slower the speed of the cutting tool. So if you're drilling in steel with a variable speed drill, you're going very slow. You can watch it turn very slow. And then if you're drilling through a ream of paper or something like that, you would go very fast. You'd crank it up really fast. Same things here is true with this. With the sawing, the harder the material, the slower you go. So this is my favorite. I've had this for probably 15, could be 20 years. This saber saw comes in very handy, and it's a little safer than a skill saw. The next thing you want to do if you're going to cut wood is cut with a skill saw. This is the next power tool you need to have, and this is indispensable for a carpenter. If you're building a house, you probably just won't even think about doing it without a skill saw. They call it a skill saw because Skill was the company who first made it in America. This actually is porta cable. So this has a blade guard on it, and so it spins and it just saws right through. It's good for cutting straight lines. Very difficult for cutting curves, or can be done, but this cuts curves quite easily. So the next step up in power tools is a skill saw, and it's just as easy to hurt yourself with a handheld power tool as it is with a woodworking machine. So you got to be very careful with these things, and a lot of people, when they first get skill saws, get hurt with a skill saw. Some people will tie the guard back and forget it, and they'll cut, and the blade will still be spinning. They'll put the saw down, and the blade's still going. It'll spin across and, whack off a toe. So you have to be very careful with skill saws, but it's the next step up. And then the step up after that would be what we call a SawedAtl, something like this. And you pull this trigger, it's variable speed, and the blade reciprocates, a reciprocating saw. So it'll just saw right down. It's a good tool for construction work and cutting long boards into short boards big enough to handle on machines. You'd use this. The next handheld power tool that I got when I was coming up is the router. Here are two routers. In fact, this is the router that I've had for 20 years. It's missing one handle on this side, and I don't use it much anymore because when you have a router, you don't have a chuck anymore, you have what they call a collet. And this is what holds the bits. All the different bits fit in here and perform different functions. But you have to loosen this nut on the collet, take the old bit out, put a new bit in, and then tighten the nut. Well, you have to lock down the shaft. You have to lock down the armature of the motor when you do that. Now this one has a little lock button on it. You push this button in, and that locks the shaft, and then you crank it with a wrench. But over the years, that mechanism can get worn, and it can cam out. So when you punch in the button and you turn it with a wrench, the button wants to pop back out again, and it doesn't turn. So you wound up putting screwdrivers into the fan blade and stopping the shaft with the fan blade, and you break the fan blades. So the point in this is get a router that you don't have a little locking button on it. Get one that changes with 2 wrenches. So this wrench goes in and locks the shaft, and this wrench goes in and turns the collet. So there's no camming out, there's no wearing out of something inside the router. This is a 1/4-inch router. That means the shaft that goes into the collet is a 1/4 inch in diameter. And most craftsmen can get by with a 1/4 inch, and I certainly got by with a 1/4 inch router for the first 8 or 7 years I was a woodworker, probably first 6 years with a 1/4-inch router. And the next step up from that is the 1/2-inch router, just the way the 1/2-inch was the next step up in electric drill. So this is a 1/2-inch router. That means the shank on this bit that goes in to the collet is a 1/2 inch in diameter, which makes it much stronger, less vibration free. I mean, more vibration free. This is the router that I use all the time in everyday life. And this router is probably, in 20 years, this router is just a little bit bigger than this router is, but 8 times more powerful. So they're getting smaller and more powerful as the years go by. One of the important things that my master taught me about when I went out to buy my first router was get one that you can hold in one hand. So you want to be able to have a router that you can hold in one hand and run down the edge of a table. So get a router that you can hold in one hand. Routers don't have variable speeds. Routers are pretty much very high speed anyway. So it's going to spin at 25,000 RPM to make a smooth cut. So that's the next step is routers. The next step after that is sanding devices. So you usually have a belt sander or a vibrating sander. So this is a belt sander. This is a Japanese one. These are very inexpensive yet excellent tools. They last a long time, especially in professional shop when employees are using them and they treat them pretty rough. These hold up very well, and you know they cost maybe $60. So that's a very good buy. Of course, you have to change the grit of the paper, but a belt sander is a must. And you know, people say that it takes less skill to operate power tools. The skill is gone from woodworking that was skillful when it was in hand tools. There is more skill and eye-hand coordination in a belt sander than there is in a hand plane. You have to have great control with a belt sander. You make a mistake with a belt sander and it can ruin a job. My master said a belt sander can make a bad job look good and a good job look bad. So that's your common run-of-the-mill everyday belt sander. But this is the big one. This is the one that was my actually first belt sander that I ever got. This is a Porter-Cable A3 Takeabout, and this sander right here will do anything that you need. We'll build a Chippendale brake front with a sander like this, and it works all day long. After you've sanded it with a belt sander, then you go to a vibrating sander. This is 1/4 of a sheet. You take a sheet of sandpaper that you buy. It's like 8.5 by 11, like a piece of computer paper. But this works on 1/4 of a sheet. You cut it, put it in here, and you can vibrate away. Now there are other sanding machines. This is a grinder, sander, polisher. You can put polishing wheels on here. A grinder like this with a circular disc is for cutting curves, and actually I use this for sculpture when I'm making sculptural pieces. And this is air-powered. All of these machines can be air-powered. Nothing wrong with air-powered tools. They're lighter, they're easier to work with, and they stay cooler while you're working with them. So air-powered is just as good as electric tools. So that's just a quick overview of the power tools that I use all the time in woodworking. See you next time when we will cover woodworking machines.